Hello everyone, I am Matteo Postacchini. I'm working at the Università Politecnica delle Marche in Ancona in Italy, and together with my group and other colleagues from CNR in Rome and Cardiff University, we are working a little bit on the experimental, some experiments on the interaction between breaking-induced vortices and nearbed structures, and also some numerical compare some numerical tests to compare our experimental finding. So briefly, after the introduction with the main motivations and very briefly to review to see what happened in the past decades in terms of analysis of these phenomena. I will give you some information about our experimental result, the experimental setup, and then the main experimental findings, and then some comparison with the numerics. So about the motivations, we have that breaking waves are generating important structures at the top, and mainly spilling and plunging breakers are very important. We have heard from many people here also in this workshop speaking about these types of breakers. So I will show that we have generating in our lab some slightly different type of breaker that generates over discontinuity. And discontinuity is another important element for our experiment, because we want to study the interaction between the surface generated vortices from the breaking waves with the nearbed vortices, which are typically generated in rivers, but also at sea in correspondence of discontinuities that, for instance, can be sandbars or any other submerged obstacles like the artificial ones, like submerged breakwaters. And so the generation of circulation cells and the detachment of vortices can be very important for the local dynamics, and also for the local erosion, and also for the exchange of sediment and sediment transport within the surf up to the source zone. So about some literature review. So here we have, I just want to show you some experiments with the non-breaking waves, and these experiments were carried out by Chang and co-authors some decades ago, and they have investigated the impact of solitary and also conchoidal waves in two separate works on coastal engineering journal, and they have observed that during so you can see here, this is the setup of their flume, and they were generating from the left to right a wave which is propagating along the flume, and then impacting this structure here, which is a rectangular one, characterized by relatively little height. And then, so we can see also from these pictures here that are representing the flow field on the left and the vorticity field on the right, we can see during the different phases of the waves how the vorticity is generated. So here, during the negative, one of the negative phases, so close to the trough, we have the generation of an anti-clockwise vortex that can be represented by these lines, so dashed or dotted as lines here. But very important at the lee side of the structure, when we have the positive phase, and essentially we have a jet during the crest phase, and we have the generation of these very nice vortex here, which is represented by these solid contour lines, which are giving the which are also suggesting the motion of this vortex, which is moving along the x direction, so towards the shore, and then moving back and going a little bit up. As you can see here, it is so moving ahead and then back towards the structure, and then moving uplift. So this is a relatively important structure which is generated at the lee side. And also recently some researchers investigated observed some similarities also when they analyzed some different structures like triangular shapes or strange, weird shapes here, which are located at the bottom of their flume. This is a very little one, and they have also run some solitary waves traveling over the structures. These are again non-breaking waves, and they observed the head loss, so the loss coefficient, so how much the energy, the wave energy is dissipated by these structures. They observed the generation of the vortices in correspondence of the lee portion of each structure here, and you can see here in correspondence of the triangular structure. And depending on the shape, the size of these structures, they have also evaluated the vortex energy, and they try to relate this relative vortex energy with the loss coefficient. So finding that the largest dissipation occurs for rectangular structures, as also observed by other authors. So now about breaking waves, it's something which is much closer to what we have trying to do in our laboratory. If we have breaking waves, like in this case, where these authors have this flume and they generated solitary waves traveling over this rectangular vertical structure that you can see here. And this is quite high with respect to the water level. And they have observed the generation due to the flow separation, as in the case of the Chang and co-authors papers. So the generation of this clockwise vortex here, that is also simulated by other other researchers during the last years, and they have observed that there is the generation of this vortex, which interacts with another vortex, which is generated by the backward breaking, which is this phenomenon, which is happening due to the approach of the wave and the traveling over this structure here, this rectangular structure here, and then there is a bulging of the free surface and the generation of a double crest. The generation of the double crest also allows the breaking in a backward way, a sort of instantaneous and unsteady hydraulic jump that generates just for a while, and then it releases this vortex, this counter-rotating vortex, this anti-clockwise vortex, which is released and then goes down and also interacts with the clockwise vortex here. There is a large amount of air which is entrained here, also caught by the simulation, and an important vortex interaction, which is also caught by the simulation. And another important thing, in my opinion, is the generation also of an additional, a third important vortex at the bed, because of the impact and the interaction actually of the clockwise vortex, the nearbed vortex, with the soil, and the generation of a counter-rotating vortex that pops up from the ground. In our case, so we have tested some different types of waves traveling in our wave flume, in our university, in our lab. We have a wave flume which is 50 meters long, 1 meter wide, and 1.3 meters high. And at the wave maker, we had a water level of 40 centimeters, the still water level, and then we ran some, let's say, homemade waves to allow the generation of these vortices that we want to analyze. So the vortex, one of them can be a little bit seen here from this kind of backward breaking that is happening at the surface, and then this interacts with a nearbed vortex which is generated at the discontinuity. So briefly, the setup is this. You can see here, maybe it's not so clear from this picture here. We have a couple of platforms characterized by a sloping ramp of 1/10. This is the first, this is the second. These are aluminum platforms, and these are connected by transparent plates with an inclination of 45 degrees. So you can see a 3D view here. where we have the approaching first ramp here and then the following ramp here. This is the transparent plate, and we have a laser source and the generation of two laser sheets which are used for the generation of our field of view, which is the one which is used for the camera recordings. About the sediment, the seeding that we have used is essentially hollow glass spheres, which are relatively sinking in the water, but they are good for our purposes of for the analysis, the visualization, and the elaboration of the data through the PTV technique. So about the waves that we have here, we have several gauges from 1 to 8, S1 to S8, deployed along the flume for analyzing the wave generation and propagation. And we have used as references the characteristics H and T recorded actually at the gauge which is just before the breaking location. So here at the discontinuity, we have the breaking location, and we have used the SC data for this analysis, while the S7 data are related to what happens just after the breaking. So here a snapshot of what's happening at each gauge. So this is telling you how the wave which is generated is very, very close to what is recorded by the S1 gauge. It is, so the crest is reducing and reducing up to the purple one, and then after the purple, which is S6, just prior to the breaking location, we have the breaking and the generation of this green oscillating a little bit rough water surface here. And you can see also the backward breaking, which is let's say suggested by this rough at this location. And here we can see also the free surface inside the field of view, so actually at S7, while the right panel is indicating the evolution along the flume. Here we have 4 different cases exactly at S7, so just after the breaking. This is a visualization. So one of the 2 approaches that we have used in our experiments, one is the visualization. So you can see here these very nice structures generated by using just one camera of the 2 that we have. The frame rate is very, very low, while the exposure time is very, very large to allow the generation of the trajectories coming from these vortices. And the resolution of the image is quite large because we did not have to make high-speed recordings, because we had this very low flow rate, this frame rate, which is very, very low. So you can individuate very easily the 2 vortices, and the nearbed vortex, which rise first, and then here you can see the nearbed vortex, which is interacting with the surface vortex generated by the breaking. Here, the particle tracking approach that we have used asked us to use both cameras and to overlap them, so overlap the images coming from the 2 to get a total region of interest, which is of this size. So in real dimensions, it's more or less 46 centimeters by 18 centimeters. And these kinds of setup allowed us to also recognize most of the region that we want to study. So let's say the entire region that we wanted to study, almost so reaching some, let's say, an elevation over the bed, which is very, very important for detecting the breaking. Here, a comparison between the visualization of the same test, same kind of test, and the particle tracking velocimetry that we have used for the elaboration of our images. Here you can see, this is not so quick, because we have 8 frames per second from this panel for this visualization here, and a very high speed, large high speed here for the particle tracking. So the particles are tracked, so we have a Lagrangian approach here, and for the identification of the particles, we have used a threshold of 2000 to say, okay, this is so sufficient for getting this particle to let's say to say that the particle is good to be tracked or not. This is a post-processing after the transformation of the Lagrangian datum into the Eulerian datum. So we have extracted these the velocity field here, and overplotted are some vortices. So this is the vorticity map here, and we have removed, we have treated this data by means of 3 different techniques. So we have filtered and decomposed the signals and smoothed them by means of the wavelet, the Gaussian, and the POD. Wavelet and POD, which are the compositions, are working on the modes and frequencies, and we have seen that their result is similar to what we could obtain from the Gaussian approach, which is in the MATLAB toolbox. So these are some preliminary results on the experiments. We are still working on this data because we want to understand which is the best technique among the 3 that I have shown just in the previous slide. But so they are giving essentially the same results for our purposes. What we can see here is so different quantities that we wanted to evaluate and their time evolution. Here you can see, starting from the equations by Levesque and co-authors in 2016, we have evaluated the circulation and the position of the vortex center, the radius, the vorticity, the kinetic energy related to the vortex, and the entropy. So all these quantities are related to the core of the vortex, which is so identified by means of a technique that we have written. So this MATLAB script that we are working on is characterized by first removal of the strain by means of the lambda2 approach. So just negative values are used to identify the vorticity dominated regions, and we have used vorticities larger than 2 second to the minus 1. And in blue, we can see the nearbed vortex, which is generated due to the flow separation, and in red, the surface vortex, which is generated by breaking waves, so the wave breaking actually. And here we wanted to see what is the evolution of these quantities, and we can see that in the very first instance, the real vortices that we want to identify are not well caught by this method, because it is identifying this vorticity here, which is not the correct one. It is not the correct nearbed vortex, but the method is so based on the research of the maximum vorticity in the domain. So this is something that we have to remove. So we have to start. So the good data are those starting from the generation of the nearbed vortex, more or less at 500 frames, more or less, in the x-axis. Then we have the generation. You can see also the interaction, the interaction with the other vortex. And here, after some instants, we can see also the nearbed vortex that disappears a little bit, and it does not give important information. So we can, so by removing some of the data, as we can see here. So if we just consider just the white area and remove the blur area because of these uncertainties, we can treat some good data, we can extract some good data in terms especially of, so for the analysis of all the tests that we have run in an integrated way. So we have extracted from these quantities the maximum absolute values of the circulation, the vorticity, the entropy, and also the radius. And we have tried to put into a scatter plot all this data, one datum per test, and this is the result. So we have tried to find some good fitting for the circulation. In red, you still see the dots which are related to the surface vortex, and in blue, the nearbed vortex. And we have seen that we have good correlations, especially for some of these quantities. So the maximum, for instance, the maximum circulation that we can observe for both vortices is very, very good, fitting even by these lines. And we are still working on that, but we can observe that the trend with the wave nonlinearity is positive. So all of these quantities taken in an absolute value are increasing with the nonlinearity. So now some little hints about the modeling. We have used the models of G, our co-author, and he's working in 2D runs and 3D-less modalities, and we have tried to run 2D run simulations to compare with some experiments that we have carried out. You can see here the generation of the wave by means of the wave maker, which is something which has been integrated in the model. You can see here, this is a piston type wave maker which has been implemented in the original version of G's code, and it allowed us to perfectly reproduce the wave maker, the piston type wave maker that we have in our flume. And then you can see the wave propagation towards the flume up to the red frame, which is in a close-up view here. And here you can see the water level, which is generating the backward braking here at the discontinuity. Here are some comparisons between the vorticity. And so the core of the vortices are quite well caught by the simulations, and we are still working on that. You can see here just the vorticity dominated portions of the domain. So about to conclude, we have analyzed the structures that are generated at the seabed and at the surface induced by breaking waves. We have reconstructed the trajectories using the PTV, and then we have moved to the Eulerian frame using in terms of flow field and vorticity, and we have seen that the main quantities in their maximum values are increasing with nonlinearity. And then some 2D run simulations are well reproducing the vortex interaction. Next steps, understanding the role of the vortex by means of applying the point vortex theory, and then some 3D-less modeling, and here some first preliminary results from this 3D-less with this evolution of the vortex along the spanwise direction as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matteo, for the presentation.